Is Donald Trump really about to pardon Derek Chauvin? That is the question that many are now asking amid a renewed push from many top conservative voices to do just that as we near the 5-year anniversary of the police killing of George Floyd. And in fact, we're now learning that officials in Minnesota are now actively preparing for that possibility. Because in addition to being convicted on state murder and manslaughter charges for which he's serving over 22 years, Chauvin also pleaded guilty to federal charges back in 2021. And specifically there, you had the former cop admitting that he had abused his power as a police officer and willfully deprived Floyd of his right to be free from unreasonable seizure by kneeling on his neck even though he wasn't resisting. And this is Chauvin also pled guilty to violating the same rights of a 14-year-old boy at a separate incident back in 2017. And so as a result, he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison where he's currently serving time. But now, because Donald Trump has the power to pardon or commute federal sentences, you're seeing conservatives come out of the woodwork to encourage him to do just that. And one of the main leaders of this effort has been Ben Shapiro, who started a whole campaign to convince Trump to grant Chauvin a pardon back in March. With Shapiro even circulating a petition, filming a 5-part docuseries called The Case for Derek Chauvin, claiming that he's innocent, and using his podcast to publicly call on Trump to grant a federal pardon.
President Trump should, in fact, pardon Derek Chauvin. He should. He should pardon him his federal charges. The evidence demonstrates that Derek Chauvin did not, in fact, commit murder of George Floyd. I think it is worthwhile to remember that there is a man who is rotting in prison because the media decided in the middle of 2020 that they were going to turn a tragic law enforcement stop that ended with the death of a man who had a significant problem with drugs and pre-existing health problems into the raison d'etre of the entire 2020 election.
Now, notably, there you have experts arguing that the evidence doesn't actually back up the claim that Shapiro is getting at, instead saying it shows the exact opposite. But a county medical examiner explicitly ruled that Floyd's death was a homicide and listed the cause as cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement's subdual, restraint, and neck compression, saying that Floyd died due to loss or deprivation of oxygen caused by the neck restraint Chauvin placed on him. And while the examiner did say that heart disease and fentanyl were contributing factors, they were not direct causes. And you had him specifically testifying during Chauvin's trial that, quote, Mr. Floyd's use of fentanyl did not cause a subdual or neck restraint. His heart disease did not cause a subdual or the neck restraint. And so with that, while many supported Shapiro, you also had a lot of people condemning his efforts. And you had many of those people also pointing out that this is a complete 180 from remarks that he made back in 2020.
I think that, once more, it is important to recognize that everyone should be on the same side of this. Right? Really, everyone should be on the same side of this. What we have seen here, and yet we are not, what we have seen here is a police officer kneeling on the neck of a black man for 4 straight minutes while he's being told by people, including the guy who is underneath his knee, that he cannot breathe. Okay, it's really, really ugly, and it's really, really bad. At the very least, the officer should go to jail for assault, you would assume, because this is not within the purview of employment. You don't get just it's police brutality, obviously. I mean, it's just egregious. It's egregious, 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 and he should be prosecuted, this officer, to the fullest extent of the law into which the evidence shows.
But again, the reaction to this was not just criticism. There was also a lot of support, and despite the criticism, you also had many people on the right amplifying Shapiro's calls and claims. Right, and that, unsurprisingly, including Elon Musk, who shared the clip of Shapiro calling on Trump to pardon Chauvin and writing something to think about. Now, with that, I'll say at the time, Trump said that he wasn't actively considering a pardon for Chauvin when asked by reporters, claiming that he hadn't even heard about it. But now, that we're creeping up on the anniversary of Floyd's death, political and law enforcement leaders in Minnesota have started preparing for the possibility. This even seeing a local outlet reporting that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the Minnesota National Guard, and local leaders around Minneapolis have all been briefed on preparations for possible civil unrest. And you even had Walz confirming that this week, telling reporters that he hasn't gotten any indication from the White House that a pardon is coming, but adding, I think it behooves us to be prepared for it. With this presidency, it seems like that might be something they would do. But with that, I think a big thing to note, and it's something that the governor also explained as well, if a pardon did actually come down, it would just be for the federal charges. Trump can't do anything about the state charges, so Chauvin would just be transferred to state prison. The governor is saying if Donald Trump exercises his constitutional right to do so, whether I agree and I strongly disagree with him, if he issues that pardon, we will simply transfer Derek Chauvin to serve out his 22.5 years in prison in Minnesota. He then also had Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison echoing that, saying that a pardon here would be entirely symbolic and functionally it wouldn't change anything because he'd still have to serve his state charges. And of the potential pardon, saying the only conceivable purpose would be to express yet more disrespect for George Floyd and more disrespect for the rule of law. But again, with that, you still have many on the right sharing reports about state and local officials preparing for a potential pardon and urging Trump to take the leap. And among those saying that, you had elected officials like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who posted, I strongly support Derek Chauvin being pardoned and released from prison. With then Shapiro also chiming in again to reiterate his stance, writing, one of the biggest reasons Chauvin was convicted was jury and political intimidation by rioters. Now the same people who helped railroad him are concerned that people might riot if justice is done. Though to that point, which Shapiro has made recently, it's important to note again that Chauvin himself pleaded guilty to the federal charges in question here. But as far as if any of this actually comes to fruition, that remains to be seen. And of course, in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts. Hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this clip from the full Philip DeFranco show. And also, a big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring our Clips channel. Turn your passion into profit over at squarespace.com/filler. Use the QR code. Because whether you're launching a business or a lucrative side hustle, your website is your digital business card. It's the only space where you control the story, no algorithms or distractions. And with Squarespace, it's so easy because they got a ton of stunning professional templates with drag and drop editing that makes site design incredibly simple. No coding required. So get started for free at squarespace.com/Phil, or scan the QR code on screen and use code Phil for 10% off when ready to launch. Squarespace.com/Phil.